Today we are going to be going over power of light technology with potent pure intent and the results possible. And I'm going to go ahead and admit Hanna. Hi, Hanna. Just making sure we're on. Day. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Let's see. Okay. So I'm going ahead and we're live.
Okay.
So welcome everyone. We are with Hanna Spence and we are waiting Damon Riddle to crack open some riddles and have Damon assist and Hanna assist. And we're going to talk about the power of light technologies that are out here and that are coming to the really just to the remembrance. They're coming back up from the ether and being rediscovered, dusted off, and polished up for best use, and how powerful it is when we have clear intention. Yeah, and if you could, Hanna, share where you are and how you are, that would be great.
Sure. So I'm here in Dunedin, Florida, at this beautiful land. I don't know if you can see it all behind me. There's mulch all over the ground. And I did learn from Elasa and her sweet partner, Daniel. They're both quite gifted at nurturing the land and helping us remember how can we build soil. Elasa calls it continent building. And I love this concept of putting down the arborist mulch, giving these trees a new home. And the soil here at the property started building in literally just a few months. I could scrape it back and see the dark material developing below the mulch. And there's about 20 fruit trees planted here, edible greens like Okinawa spinach. Elasa and Daniel have also done this incredible permaculture at their space. And we're wanting to spread it to people because being self-sufficient with our health, with our food, and things like transportation and energy, I see this as the path forward for humanity. Is like you're saying, Elasa, we're just really remembering the technology that we already have at our fingertips and just remembering what's already here for us and this heaven on earth. And then just to give everyone, a preview of Damon before he joins, he has an absolute incredible healing journey that, working with the Theraphi technology was assisted him, but learning about the quantum physics and learning about how energy is transforming on the atomic elemental level. And that was a big part of his healing. And I really have been looking forward to this conversation. Elasa and Damon and I have been talking about this for a while because of sort of this is bringing us all together. How are we facilitating what people would call miracles by understanding the science behind miracles and connecting the spiritual world with the quantum physics science world, bridging the two, because the more you learn about each, the more you see how interconnected they are. And how, Elasa, you've been working with the Akashic Records for years and facilitating sessions with people on one-on-one, and the years and decades of you have of experience, and how you might translate something that Damon will say in the quantum physics language, how you might speak about the same thing from your perspective of the way you've been facilitating work with people and witnessing their own healing journeys. So I really am going to look forward to just listening a lot because of the personal experience Damon has, and now he's also facilitating for people, and then also the decades of experience you have, Elasa, seeing it from the point of view of the Akashic record work and how those two really sort of combine. So we'll patiently wait for Damon, but do you want to, Elasa, do you want to start off by just sharing your perspective of how you see the quantum physics? Oh, there he is.
Hey, Damon.
Hey guys, good to see you.
Good to see you.
I love that background lesson.
Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, so we were just semi introducing you, Damon, and just kind of introducing around the table. And Hanna, you wanted me to just share about the Akashic work. Is that what you're just talking about?
Sort of your perspective of how you've learned how the quantum physics, but maybe the language that overlaps when working with the Akashic records.
Yeah, so I'll just share briefly, and then we'll have Damon jump in and kind of go around and around. Just Akash meaning ether, meaning, sky, ether, and that plane of existence, the multiple planes of existence that have been holding light codes or information held in the light at different frequencies. And each frequency subset, then it defines a plane. And so all these different civilizations, what we call past, present, future, etc., all of that is holding all this information in the ether. And so when we unpack it with pure intent and we understand like who we are, why we are, and what we're actually seeking, or own that which we would have said we are seeking, meaning the wish fulfilled, we just know it is, we already know we're well, we know we're whole, and we're looking for that the information held in the ether, in the Akash, which is, seemingly unconscious. When we get a little glimpse of it from meditation, from working with these technologies that put us in just that perfected sequencing so that we can actually see in the dark. When we have that little bit of information of who, what, when, where, why, and we get to bring out of the unconscious back to our awareness of what was hidden in the field, that information then unravels itself in the ether, in the Akash. And once you understand it with the awareness, it literally comes back centripetal, it comes back at negentropic. And, that which you just said and claimed becomes an isness, then you are back into wholeness. So it jumps the whole so-called healing process, really quick. Yeah. So Damon, just can you share about where you are, what you're up to right now, and then we'll kind of go around.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm Damon Riddle, and I'm here in Connecticut in my office, sitting in Wethersfield. So, yay, Theraphi. Woohoo. And yeah, I'm just here finishing up my day, helping some people. I just had a number of clients leave today, and I'm seeing some great results. I couple my Theraphi practice with some hands-on, so I do craniosacral therapy and some other stuff as well. And they work extremely well together, as you probably know, Elasa. And so just diving into that stuff and trying to connect the dots. My background is much like yours, where I'm hands-on trained. I do a lot of work in that field. I've been almost 20 years now. A number of different modalities. A lot of it was actually more focused on orthopedic stuff. And so I'm sort of trained as an orthopedic specialist. And so mechanistically and that kind of thing was more my speed. But I have a healthy dose of the energetic side of things and was trained very holistically in indigenous approaches, shamanic healing stuff. And so trying to draw these seemingly disparate ideas of sort of shamanic healing, ether, and Akash and stuff, which is very valid, into a modern sense of sort of quantum physics and connecting those dots terminally, almost, but in a way that we can speak about together. Because all these terms basically sort of overlap. And we say a lot of synonym stuff, and people think that it's different. If you say ether or Akash, and I say quantum vacuum, Higgs field, 0-point field, whatever, it's the same thing, in my opinion. And so that's what I've been trying to focus on, is not just understanding the processes, but drawing them together across the board, because I think that's what I've noticed most, is that in the process of doing this and trying to cast a wide net to see who else I can talk to and help understand, it's very interesting how separated people think things really are, and at the base of everything, at that Akash level, at that ether level, from the quantum vacuum, the background field, whatever, the scalar potentials, the process of emanating out from that and connecting and just what you described, we can talk about, as you beautifully described. You can put it in a number of different ways that somebody who, like Dan, or another physicist or somebody who's an engineer, would better grasp, because they understand, as opposed to a word like ether. Like I said, it's just quantum vacuum. It's potentials. So the nature of healing is really pulling on the background potential for, as you said, that negentropic realigning, that reordering of self, of that energy into a matter to maintain its spin, if you will. And that process is one, again, it's so widespread in the world through traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, hands-on healing, Western medicine in some respects. But yet nobody's really connected the quantum side of things to it in a way that's able to be shared with everybody and understood across the board. And so that's been a big part of what I'm trying to do, is educate myself to understand the processes, but also understand how to speak to different people who may see it a different way and still, be on point with them. So that's been sort of, aside from the helping folks, obviously, I want to try and help society as a whole to understand these concepts and grasp them better. And so that's been really my focus for the past couple of years.
Yeah,
really
simplifying it. And
yeah,
do you, I'm
simplifying
just,
and just sharing it.
yeah, do you do the cranial at the same time as Theraphi?
No, I'll do it first.
good.
And then
I mean, not good, but I know it would
Yeah.
probably ground out and kind of make the field shift from being that perfected. That's awesome. And so, Hanna, I know you had like some dialing in that maybe you could ask Damon some good questions, because it's about simplifying it, crossing every board, every ear that needs to hear it, and really, as we did in Egypt, times cast the net wide.
Yeah, so just to continue on those, points you were both bringing up, Elasa, I feel like you were describing that point, locating a point that where the bleeding charge might happen because of a traumatic event. And, to quote Dan Winter, I would say that pain is broken fractality leading to bleeding charge. So place in our energy body where there's some kind of event that has us in fear of that thing happening again. And we need a deeper comprehension, understanding, processing of what that was, why it was appropriate, what we learned, how to be grateful for it. So that what you were describing, Elasa, in my mind's eye, I was seeing it really just come down to that point of plonk and collapse to where the energy field is whole for the first time. And now, Damon, this has been such an important part of your healing journey, to be able to learn how are the quantum physicists describing the same thing in scientific words using such a thing as a quantum vacuum, right? And to where we can literally be able to maybe test and measure the energy body. People take photographs of the auras and they can maybe locate those places. So Damon, how would you describe, I guess you came in right as Elasa was sort of describing that process of working with the Akashic records. Would you, do we have a scientific way to talk about that point in the energy body? Do we have quantum physics words? How would you talk about a place where there's bleeding charge? How would you go about talking about that with a quantum physicist?
Well, I mean, you described it pretty well. I think Dan's terminology there from a quantum physics perspective. The problem with a quantum physicist is that they may not have any biological background. So they may think still, and this is where even doctors that I talk to have a hard time, is that we think of the body and physiology as being biochemical. And we overlook the steps that lead to that, which is the quantum electrical side. So when Dan talks about electrical engineering and the idea of charge, bleeding out of broken fractality, a physicist or a biology person wouldn't really understand that until they connect the idea that the system energetically as a whole, like every piece of matter is energetically a crystal lattice. And the symmetry of that lattice and the spin angular momentum conservation is what determines its longevity to it. So if you want to talk about things like entropy and negentropy, it's all about the spin rate, that angular momentum conservation towards the center of mass, if you will, the center of that access point where it's spinning, is longevity. And when you can see that happening in the body and how the body is manifesting spin states to maintain itself and to regenerate itself and to re-engage, energize itself, then they can maybe start putting it together, in my hope. Because that's really what we're talking about here in terms of tapping into the 0 point. here in physical space-time, entropy rules, and so we're always moving towards sort of a decay. But the Akashic side of things, the 0 point side of things, is negentropic. It's always moving in the opposite direction. And so when we tap into that negentropic side of things, we're encouraging the body to move back towards order, which is what the body is naturally doing, and we call it healing. So cell metabolism and healing are processes of tapping into negentropic process created in the 0 point field first and foremost. And then they transcend and sort of transduce into physicality and matter. And so, you know, again, if a physicist can follow me on that little statement there, then they'll understand a little better.
So I'm kind of curious to hear Elasa's perspective on one of the topics you and I had gone over of these two parallel streams of reality that are mirror image, one flowing backwards, one flowing forwards. The movie Tenet is a great example of the science behind that. And John Archibald Wheeler and Richard Feynman being the physicists that actually worked on the science. And I'm really curious to hear Elasa's perspective, because Damon, you and I had a really amazing moment when you helped me sort of tap into how these two streams, one going forward, one going backward, perfect mirror image, we can sort of tap into this reality and create these little time loops, or, you know, where it's 0 point in the middle. And Elasa, I just wanted to sort of hear your perspective on that. And what do you think of that? It feels like something you already are familiar with.
Well, I'm thinking about several things. So I'm thinking about, you know, when we have immortality, when we awaken back to our immortality, we awaken back to the possibility that we are an ascended being, eternally, long, everlasting, maintaining this framework that looks like you look right now, for as long as you so-called choose to have that avatar look that way. And when we actually can allow our psyche to take that in and chew on it and sit with it and allow it, then that negentropic natural flow back to 0 point, back to the immortal happens. But there's only a handful in the collective, you know, if you could see behind me, there's like 12 little chalices, you know, and it's the one, it's like, usually around me, I've only got like usually 12 others who are willing to like actually sit with that and hold that. And then the rest, there's such deep layers of agreements, unconscious agreements, vows, oaths, commitments, fear points, like you said, that bleeding charge, which when I think about bleeding charge, I think about pain, and I think about unauthenticity. I think about fear, like you said, like I'm afraid to even be immortal. You know, what is that going to mean? Or fear of like, what are they going to do to me this time? Like I just had to burn a bunch of papers just before I got on here. I mean, it's forever ongoing of like what I keep discovering that I hid from myself, but that I bring back up when I get into these immortal talks that we're at right now. It's like all of a sudden all this stuff comes out of the woodwork. Like, oh wow. And then all of a sudden I look at myself and I'm like, wow, I look immortal. I look like I just dropped another 20 years again. Right. And all that paper I just dropped into the fire back up to spirit that was holding bindings and the reality of bleeding charge. And I read it was a journal I found. I was cleaning out my trunk because I'm going on a journey tomorrow. And like, you know, it was about dreams, but like if you write in journals that hold like, you know, seemingly unconscious, or even you're just sharing to yourself about things that you don't want to infinitely repeat, and then you keep those journals stacked, like you're literally binding again that entropy, that pain, that fear, whatever those stories are, and they just keep repeating themselves. So, you know, it's like looking for the cleanup that you can do, and be willing to do the cleanup of how much you can find of vows, oaths, commitments, arrangements, documentation that you put together knowingly or unknowingly, your parents, etc. And even if you can't find it because you don't have it in front of you, like just call those things out to release it. How many of us, you know, like I said, there's usually a handful that are willing to even do that and to let that go, so that the energy comes out of those bindings, those light particles comes home to you. And then you again become back, you're allowing yourself to be streaming back to this immortal life, stream back negentropic, back to 0 point. Otherwise, if you don't, you're like getting old, yeah, this shoulder has been hurting the past few weeks. I'm like, oh, what's going on? And so it's that willingness to look at what stream are you on? Are you like bleeding charge and heading on out? And, like you're going to go with the whole thing that you're going to die around 80, like the common norm? Or are you willing to like, tap back into the I am consciousness of I am that I am. And I am, an ascended being here to like bliss myself out and remind a handful of others about this possibility. Okay, which timeline am I on, or which stream, like you said, Hannah, am I on? I have to watch that movie. And which one do I want to do? Like I flip flop. Like I'm gonna be quiet in a minute. I literally just came out of meeting you, Hannah, a few years ago, like another sleep zone. How did I fall asleep? What happened? I remembered I was sitting at dinner with this family I'm going to go meet tomorrow. So it's interesting. And I kept eating and eating and eating. And something happened. I got looped in by some entities. And I fell asleep again.
Wow. Yeah.
And obviously I woke up a lot of times in between there. But this is where we're at. We're in this like wild game, that we created by every word we say and everything we think. And so it's being willing to think really bold and big and say it out loud a lot of times too. I forget, I can think things and I can instantly create reality. We all are. But if I say it, and so it is. And I just did a big like call out after I was doing that burn. And I was like, any of y'all hear me? Stargate's open. And I start hearing the streams. They're like, Pleiadian High Council on board. Sirius High Council on board. And I'm like, okay, I'll say it out loud. And then I get strings of people like Stargate sisters, like, we're here, we're waiting, like you called out, and I haven't talked to them in 2 years. So it's just, we're so fun. So I'll move on. How do you go? Keep going.
So I love it. And just to give a little more clarity. So the parallel one that I'm talking about right now, it's a mirror image. But as you were talking, I was sort of like receiving your answer of what you're like with those journals and with documents like that. Because if this mirror image where our birth hasn't happened yet, that reality from our perspective, it's so with doing what you're talking about though, I feel like it releases any bindings that keep both of those streams, because if the events haven't happened yet in one stream, by keeping the documents, we're allowing those events to still happen. By sort of revisiting our past and healing it, it means that those things, in a sense, don't need to happen because we've already resolved it. So I was sort of seeing all these potential binding points that we almost want to release so that we can change our past, literally. We give ourselves the childhood we would have dreamt of. And then that means it gets anchored because in a sense it hasn't happened yet, and all time is now. So I feel like I was tapping into what you were like, that felt like an appropriate response in terms of what I was picking up from it. Yeah.
Damon, what do you got?
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. I think that you described the process we discussed yesterday very well. The feedback loop that Hanna's talking about is really one that's sort of always there. And so it's not necessarily like a separation between our physical self and our spiritual self, because we're embedded within one another. It's a superposition, if you will. And when you talk about these loops and these opportunities, things work cyclically, right? The time loop comes back around. And so if you've implanted a trauma or information, we'll just leave it in general sense, that information is going to come back around and inform your future decisions. So there's a concept called retrocausality. And so if you have a trauma that you're holding on to, that's going to come up in different circumstances, different scenarios, because you're reminded of it. And that loop is coming back around. Your reaction to it is tied in a lot of ways to how you feel, about that information coming back up. And, the process that you're describing very well, Elasa, I do myself here, whether it's hands-on or Theraphi, where it's trying to help people recognize that when they come back around is an opportunity, not to sort of shy away from the pain, but to actually sort of examine it and to establish a different relationship with that information, shift it in a way so it's not so asymmetrical. put it back into a perspective where you can handle it and soften it and change it over time or immediately, and again, just depending on whatever you want to do. And so that process is one, if you want to get fancy with it, it's called fractal information theory. But simply put, it's just that looping information coming back around and not necessarily determining or dictating, but influencing our perception. And that's where it all comes down to on either side of things, is where's our perception? Because again, if we can sit here and focus on our physical body and looking at the phone and waving my hands around as I see myself doing, we can also recognize I can close my eyes and my mind is still working there. Like that's, my spiritual self is here, my physical self is here. It's all working together to do the thing it needs to do, whatever the phenomena is working towards. And we are just assisting that, and we're helping to reestablish a better conduit of that information loop to be symmetrical for our highest purpose, to heal, to be longevity, to have, joy, bliss, happiness, all those things, they can be brought to bear in the course of a trauma to reestablish that loop into one that's more productive as opposed to destructive,
Right. I love that because even though, again, if for whatever negentropic, meaning organization, or entropy, meaning chaos, whichever, they're both always happening.
Yeah.
But in that moment, and you find, let's say, a pain point, or, something, every moment something's happening. And it's how we're defining those moments that are literally fractally being recreated again and again and again, sometimes seemingly cyclically, because we put like a, time stamp on it, or, a season stamp or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, how are we perceiving in that moment? And we get to actually choose again and again and again how we're going to perceive it and what spin we're going to put on it, literally.
Yeah, literally.
Are we going to like love on it and understand it? And then all of a sudden it's like, it comes back and fills us back out. Or are we going to be like pissed off at it again, and then it's going to do the opposite spin.
Yeah. And I was fortunate enough when I was younger to study with a guy named John Kabat-Zinn for a little while. And he was a really fascinating guy who was a professor at Harvard for a number of years. And he studied Eastern philosophies, meditation, that kind of stuff. And he brought the idea of mindfulness meditation into pain management at Harvard. He studied it very deeply. And he basically said this, what you just described, is that the process of us going back and creating a different relationship mindfully and deciding to feel and see and observe and participate in our own traumas as they come back up in a different way in the moment creates a different trajectory in the future.
Yeah.
Somebody with chronic pain who's devastatingly back pain, can't move. After a while being in pain, they're exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And a lot of them, you start to identify as that pain and you think there's no way out of it. But, something as simple as John Kabat-Zinn handing somebody a raisin, or 3 raisins actually, and spending 45 minutes looking at the raisin, smelling the raisin, touching the raisin, thinking about raisins before you even put it in your mouth, touching it to your lip.
Okay.
It's a process of helping somebody to be mindful of how much control they have over their own self and their own decisions and how that then plays forward. Because again, if you're in pain and you're constantly trying to avoid that pain, you're going to be, fearful and running from it always, as opposed to, which to your point, a lot of people want to do or even know that it's possible. They don't want to go back into that pain and look at it, re-examine it. Even though they're in it all the time, they're still trying to sort of avoid it or just manage, as opposed to diving back in and looking for solutions and ways to soften. Because some of these people had intractable pain. I mean, stuff that was, not things you were going to touch. They weren't getting relief from meds, surgeries, that kind of stuff. But just sitting and being mindful and changing their opinion and their observation of what was going on with them was enough to soften really incredibly painful stuff for people into manageable spaces. Not to say they were cured or anything, but it's just, again, just an analogy of how people's perception and how we feel about what's going on creates a lot of our own problems, if you will. It exacerbates it. And so we can dive into that stuff and have control over much of it. There's a lot of things in the universe that happen that we don't have any control. I don't know why I got cancer, but it doesn't really matter because I did. And you just deal with it, and if I sit here and beat myself up about it all the time, it's counterproductive to solutions, And it's counterproductive to my quality of life and my ability to stay connected to love and, spend time with my kids without being down and all that kind of stuff. So the mindfulness aspect of things is really, I think, the ability for us to inhabit that observer point that sort of sits between or superposed in both physicality and astral, that has the leverage to make the change. So neg entropy is moving back towards that spot because it's bringing us towards the still point where we can have the leverage to decide to see and feel and do things differently.
It's the sweetness for sure, the witness.
Yeah, that's the spot, the sweet spot.
Did you ever have moments during your healing journey, Damon, where you would go into because as you were speaking about this mindfulness meditation for pain management, and the gentleman, what was his name again? Can you repeat his name?
Yeah, sure. Jon Kabat-Zinn.
Jon
Kabat-Zinn. It's JONKABATZINN.
Okay. Did you ever have experiences if you were, wanting to face the pain of like going into the pain and feeling it? I mean, I personally have had experiences where I was able to experience pain as just an intense sensation and let go of the negative association with this intense sensation, and to where it was able to, seems like, go in with my consciousness to bring in that light and awareness and just a point in my body that was really just calling out for attention. Did you have moments like that on your journey of where you went into the pain literally and were? Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that was a big part of it. It's a pretty devastating thing to be diagnosed with any sort of serious disease. But when you're 28 and have a 3-month-old kid and realize somebody tells you, oh man, that seizure you just had is caused by a brain tumor, it's a little bit of a shock. And so the physical pain wasn't so much, it was the emotional pain. And so physicality wise, there's a fair amount of pain I've been through between surgeries and chemo and that kind of stuff. But that, to your point, like I can manage that a lot easier than I could manage the emotional stuff. Okay. So for me, it was the process of untying myself and getting out of my own way and trying to not beat myself up for things I can't control, honestly. And, to try and just hold on to and inhabit the things that I can. And over time, my focus, has shifted. I've been able to shift my focus, I should say, to really appreciate the time that I have, regardless of whatever happens, and to focus on love and light and community and, healing myself and others and, just the positivity, the bliss, the shareable wave. That's the kind of stuff I've really focused my energy on since 2008 or whenever I was diagnosed.
Right.
So, so it was, that process has been a long one. So the physical pain was, like I said, secondary. The emotional pain was what I really dove into.
That makes a lot of sense.
It really made a difference, because I was coming, especially when I found the Theraphi, I was coming out of a really dark period. I mean, I was the healthiest I've been in 2015, 16. I was in great shape. I was, running, lifting, doing all kinds of great stuff. 16, 17, cancer starts coming back. I'm like, oh no, like, how'd that happen? I'm doing everything right. And so it was a huge, just knocked my foundation right off from under what I built over the past 10 years. Went through treatment and stuff and just was really down anyway. I committed to doing the treatment because I thought that it was my best shot,
What treatment?
In 2018, it was surgery, radiation, and then chemo. So I did the full gauntlet in 2018. And again, I submitted myself to that thinking, okay, well, this is my best shot. Let me see what I can do. And that bought me, a couple of years of misery, I would say, but blissful misery because I was still alive, so you can't complain too much. But
you had already recovered once, basically, from cancer, and then this it was basically you had achieved a high level of health, and then it came back. So it was like the emotional roller coaster of that. And so,
was it with? Sorry,
no,
was it with Theraphi that you had?
Ultimately, yeah, I resolved it with the Theraphi.
Okay. So then come back where you were at, and so you go through the radiation, and then what? What happened after that?
Well, I did the radiation, the chemo, and everything else, and during all that time, I was laid out. I mean, the surgery is basically like the craniotomy was basically like having a medically induced stroke. And so the left side of my body has been affected, you know, sensation, movement, strength, all that kind of stuff. I've got most of it back now, but my left hand is still a little bit weird in some parts of my body. I still have seizures from time to time, and some other stuff. But the process that I went through with all that stuff was just really heavy psychically, you know, because I holistically don't, you know, I understand the body holistically, and to poison myself to try and heal myself seemed very, you know, not congruent. But again, you know, in the circumstances, it was like, well, that's my best option. Let me give it a shot. After I did all that stuff, it got me about 3 months of clear scans, and then it started to come back. And not only did it start to come back, but it showed a secondary one coming with it, which totally, you know, flattened me. And so instead of getting angry and depressed and all that kind of stuff, I just said, well, okay, let me see what else I can do. And stepped away from Western medical treatment and went for the Theraphi and other, you know, grounding, fasting, intermittent fasting, and all those kinds of other natural things that felt much more congruent and in line with what I wanted. And so that process led me to really deeply going down this Theraphi rabbit hole and all this other quantum physics stuff and mega entropy. And so, you know, I really sort of had to learn this stuff in my mind. I had skin in the game, and it was a motivation that I turned into something that is really beautiful for me now, because that fear and that depression, if you will, you know, the PTSD stuff that comes along with any sort of terminal diagnosis, you know, it really kind of screws with you. And to be able to take that and do what I call energetic keto and sort of flip that negativity into something that's positive and say, okay, well, you know, let me see if I can figure this out. Let me find these things that work. Let me do as much as I can. And I was content to say, okay, even if this doesn't work, I'm going to have information I can share with somebody else.
Right.
And it just sort of turned out that way, you know? And so being able to, I guess tying back to that temporal loop stuff, fractal information theory, is that as that comes up for me now, every day, as I limp or trip over something or slur a word or forget stuff, you know, just from my disabilities, that it doesn't bother me so much, because I know that there's more than just this physicality. I know that there's a purpose for me to have gone through this and to share it with people and to help them get out of that situation. Seems to be that. Like, that's what I'm trying to frame it as. That's what I am framing it as. You know, so my negativity, I flip around and try and use it as a positive example for people, myself included, to then follow through. And I'll just leave it.
And so how did your process go? Like, when did you feel like you shifted after this last time?
Well, it was a pretty long process, actually. Initially, Theraphi, the first couple of sessions, you know, as you guys have probably recognized yourself, like the first session or two, it's like, whoa. And again, I was coming out, I was pretty beat up. There's really a lot of brain fog from chemo. I've always been light sensitive, headaches, that kind of stuff. And, you know, a number of other things going on digestive wise. And within the first couple of weeks, things felt a lot better. I mean, I'm one of the guys who, you know, one of the 30% that had their vision increase. You know, my vision, light sensitivity isn't a thing for me anymore. My seizures have calmed down quite a bit. I still, like I said, still get them every once in a while. Like, there's not a way to not be on meds for that at the moment. So we'll see if that changes. But, you know, all these positive things started happening, and you know, I'm just super grateful for them. And I try and pin all of that to, like, I need to understand, there's a part of me that needs to understand why, you know, that mechanism of action, you know, that's part of my training anyway. But just me as a person, like, I feel like perspective wise, looking back on this whole trajectory of my life, this is why I'm here.
Yeah.
You know, to experience that and then move forward with it and help share solutions.
Yep. And for me, I always tell everybody, it's like, you don't know what to get rid of until you pick it up, you know, and deal with it. And so if that thing still happens, even though you're doing these different type of light technologies and beyond, and it comes up, okay, well, there you go. You've got something to re-examine and re-love on and you know, integrate back in. And so it's still purposeful, you know, if that seizure still happened, like, there's something still there. And then the willingness to to be on the journey of examination and diving into it is everything. And then we learn that, oh my gosh, that's actually why I'm here. Like these are the keys to the kingdom, to actually examine all these different pieces that had fractured out.
Yeah, well said. It's quite a journey, and so to sum up the trajectory there, because of COVID and the timing of everything that happened, I actually didn't have a scan from that one that showed expansion for another year and a half, and it kind of freaked my doctor out, and that was fun because that's fine. But yeah, when I went back a year and a half later, everything had resolved, and that was 22. So now I've had a total of 3 scans that show that things, are still resolved, if you will.
Awesome.
So, not gonna work. Keep that rolling, I said Theraphi. So
yeah.
But yeah, the process is one that, like I said, we have much more control over than we realize, and that's where John Kabat-Zinn and these ideas like Dan talks about. And just the recognition of the bigger board that we play on, the bigger thing that we're a part of. So the recognition that we are working in, forward time and backwards time equally. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
You can engineer from that perspective. You can better plan your route, if you will.
And I'm definitely seeing now that the bigger board play out and how all the pieces are needed to be exactly how they are. And like, running a center and, and some like today, someone's on the Theraphi this morning, it's rising. And I feel others on the Theraphi more than I feel myself, so it's like, and if I have a connection with them at all, it's like, oh, she's on the Theraphi. So, feeling the group and noticing the group's bigger fractality that's happening as we're coming back around the bend. And then I'm going to say one more thing. And then sometimes feeling that dip that happens because of like a so-called full moon, or, everybody's buying into some kind of story going on. And like all of a sudden, all these great things just like dip for a minute. But I noticed they only dip small dips because we're working on this bigger board together. So I find that just really refreshing to be someone. I think Dan said this the other day on a live, be mindful who you're nesting with. Do the people that you're with, can they actually nest well with you? Can they actually handle what you're saying? Can you guys handle what I just said? Hopefully you can handle it. Because if we can handle it, then we like, we get up another rung up the ladder, and then we project out yet another, infinite heaven on earth experience together. And then we become like the magic carpet for all these other souls, to go ahead and remember. So yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
And if they can't nest, if they can't embed, like you might step away. So let me just say one more thing. So I got called to an assignment to an area of like, it just felt really low. And I'm like, Spirit, like, you want me to go do this? This feels really low. Like, can they even embed and nest, with everything that, and they're like, yeah, they're like, just almost right there. Just go, give it your all and be present and lay out the big blueprint that's going to happen when you do the land work on that space. I'm like, okay, I'll show up.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's just perfect, because I feel like I've been experiencing that lately too. It's like I'll feel comfortable going in environments that I've like been avoiding a lot, and I really try not to go in, but it's just been in the flow, and I'm with people and they're like, come on, let's go here. And I'm like, well, I feel safe with them, so sure. And yeah, and then like things happening, and it's just like, oh, someone's in an argument, I'm just there holding space. But I love that you just said that, and that working with the land in particular is really coming to focus in a big way. And in particular, also like sound and water for me. And it was, I happened to catch a little tidbit from someone last night where they were showing the symbol for a dolphin is like, it's like a dot surrounded by a circle over what looks like waves. And it's this yeah, and representing sound and water. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I feel drawn to work with those modalities together. And it's like the dolphin represents that. But I hear you on Elasa on just shining our light and knowing that we're free to shine it anywhere and everywhere all the time. And there's been times in the past where I felt like I needed to protect my heart and sort of, maybe even my posture would reflect this kind of protective. But whereas now things have shifted, and I feel committed to just bringing technology, awareness of technology to people, branching out into transportation beyond the medical, but learning these topics and the scientific topics from the healing perspective, it translates really well into all these other realms, whether we're talking about buildings that are going to assist our healing, or how do we get better miles per gallon and stop polluting the air. And those technologies have to do with vortexes and coming down to Planck. And you realize, oh, this is just regaining knowledge that humanity already had. Even just the 1800s, the incredible building, with stone and the anti-gravity technology. I mean, we already had it. So, but anyway, how are we doing on time? I know that this is, we have a limit here, which we can always do future conversations.
Yeah.
I would love to, but
we have 10 minutes, but yeah.
Oh, great. Do you all have something, anyone has something?
Anything, Damon, anything else that you were sitting with on that?
No, I just think that the conversations like this need to be happening more often, because there's a lot of great flow that happens and find common ground amongst us who are willing. It attracts more people who are like on the verge, or like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
This thing over here isn't working, but let me, and that's really, I think, the most important piece is just sparking that maybe in somebody's mind. One of the things I studied early on that got me into hands-on therapy was a book by the name of The Ego's Quest by Fred Alan Wolf. He's a quantum physicist, but studied shamanic healing across the world for like 30 years. Wow. And long story short, his takeaway was that the most important thing that a shaman can do to initiate somebody's healing, spontaneously, whatever they call it, is to perform rituals in a way that convinces somebody that the impossible is possible, which takes them out of their limitations, right? And then that opens them up to being like, okay, what is this opportunity? What is this potential that I can then manifest? That's the place we need to be, because that's pulling you closer to that still point, that awareness point, that place that we inhabit. And when we get more of ourselves to operate there, it's more peaceful for us and we can navigate better. Not to say there's not still going to be stormy seas, but it's much easier for us to be in line with our principles and stable. And the more people that recognize this, I feel, this process in a whole, in a broader, board perspective, see the whole chessboard in pieces, the better we're all going to be able to manifest for ourselves and each other and collectively. So collective consciousness plays a huge part in this. So when Dan talks about being a shareable wave, he's absolutely right, because the more of us that are looking from our own unique perspectives, the wider perception provides better opportunities for more succinct solutions. So I feel like that's a big part of what we're doing here, is we're cohering, we're resymmetry, making more symmetrical ourselves collectively. And you do that by individually working first, and then finding your space, your niche, unique talents, whatever it is, whatever your purpose is for, and then moving forward with that and letting it ripple out however it does.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that you continue to bring up the word symmetrical and recognizing those sort of, any place where there's healing, how that's sort of creating a asymmetric nature that we want to just come back to the symmetrical, everything being symmetrical. Damon, you and I had talked about the need to write coherent storylines with one another to ensure as a collective we're writing a coherent storyline, and everyone's individual story is coherent with the greater story that we're trying to write together. And you and I were talking about the importance of that. And Elasa, you and I have talked about it as well, sort of the need for us to come together as a group, focusing on the outcome for humanity, the outcome for everyone, And then we move from there of what is, you know, sort of the highest and most good, might say, for all involved, or however we want to phrase it. And that being the guiding light. And Damon, I like that you keep bringing up the shareable wave. You know, we're all quoting Dan on that, but it's such a key principle of, okay, are these thoughts that I would want someone to be thinking about me? Would I want this person to hear this thought? Would I want everyone to hear me thinking this thought about this person? And if the answer is yes.
That's huge right there.
Yep.
Yeah, goosebumps.
Because, you know, we are eternally shareable waves or not, which is creating. It's either like embedding perfectly, or it's literally clashing and canceling things out for people, you know, in both directions. But yeah,
we're constantly pumping out waves, and so it's either constructive or destructive, you know.
Right
you're
there.
Either part of a shareable wave or you're off, you know. And from an organic standpoint, I usually use the I think in terms of sort of, are you an immune cell or a pathogen, you know? And when you're of service to the bigger fractal organism we're a part of, what's your role in it? You know, and you can decide to be one or the other, and you can change your decision several times. But generally speaking, we all need to be on the immune side of things if we want to be, you know, again, symmetrical and sharing in the same path of longevity and sustainability within the bigger understanding that we now have of how this all works, you know. So we're moving towards a place where we can all see it better. We just need to all be able to share it and understand that our unique gifts in that way don't need to be separating us. They actually need to be honored and celebrated, because that uniqueness is what gives you a different opinion or perspective of something than I do. And you can share that with me, and we can work together to come up with a better answer, solution, way forward towards that goal, you know. So the more people that collectively understand and work together towards this stuff as a shareable wave, the more efficiently we can bring this to bear, and the more longevity and sustainability and bliss we can all share it. And we can eliminate a lot of the suffering of scarcity and fear and disease and all that kind of stuff, you know. So
we complement one another, and everyone pitches in as a team, and it just happens instantaneously as soon as everyone has the clear goal, and it shifts. I got chills now, because we were just talking about it with Lestiel, who helped build a labyrinth with Elasa, and she was talking about how the pavers appeared and all the right people in the right amount and shifting, and everyone, and it's not about what idea came from who, because we're just all the vessels in the moment trying to almost just remote view the future, essentially, and remember the future, as Kay put it so beautifully when we were discussing it earlier.
And being authentic in each now moment, right? And just being present, authentic. And if it seems like that authenticity of three beings, like here we are, and we had 3 different points of view, but we are being authentic, then it's like we're constantly coming out, you know, and giving ourselves the feedback needed, that the 3 of us authentically with our hearts open we would find that solution together. It would compromise and like weave together, embed together, and then we would actually remember the solution, because we were the 3 coming forward. Authenticity is the opposite of that bleeding charge. It literally becomes negentropic, and so everything comes back together, and then we can see, we're like, oh, then our vision starts clearing. Oh, that's the solution. Oh, there's the rock we need. And, you know, we all pick it up. It takes 3 hands to pick this up. Let's all go pick it up.
Oh, I love it.
You know?
And also the centripetal nature of negentropy means that it's attraction, means that it's gravity, you know. So when we do these things together and we share, we're attracting the solutions, we're attracting more people, we're attracting, you know, the answers that we want and need. And collectively doing it in a way that's mindful allows us to then plot our path that much better, you know, and become that much more attractive to people. And I don't mean that in a physical way, but attractive in a spiritual way. You know, magnetic, however you want to describe it, you know, energetic, the whole thing comes together.
Yeah, right, as you were saying that, because this has been coming through lately for me, and, you know, Dan will emphasize how consciousness, gravity, bliss, this is all, you know, centripetal force, charge collapse. And so, it literally, when you were saying it, a light bulb went off, because I'm like, that's right. These are all the same principles, the same forces, the same vortexes. Who's to say that the gravity vortex is any different from the vortex of the soul? You know what I mean? It's sort of like, it's like our soul wants to gravitationally, it's pulled into our body. There's a gravitational pull of our soul on our physical body on our soul to pull it in. So I love that you brought that back in like that. Yeah, it's great.
And then you brought up something else, Damon, before we complete, about the ritual and like bringing about, Hanna and I were talking about this earlier, bringing about the seemingly impossible possibility to ourselves and the clients and people around us, and making that a ritual then allows them to actually, it allows it to come into possibility. And yeah, there's something huge there.
Yeah, it's the allowing piece. You know, you said allowing as a word a number of times, and a lot of people think when you manifest something, you're sort of reaching for it, you're trying to grab it and make it happen, as opposed to what really happens, where you're holding space and attracting it to you. You know, so in chaos theory, there's something called strange attractors. Basically, in scalar waves and longitudinal interferometry and stuff, you're creating strange attractors, and the idea of gravity and love and attraction being sort of the same force is very powerful, and there is definitely something there. And I think we're very well on the way to helping to nail that down as much as possible, you know, and share it.
Yeah, I'd say that's a great topic of research. You know, the relationship between consciousness, gravity, the soul. It's like we're all just talking about. It's all the same thing.
It's all the same thing. When you get to the brass tacks of unified field theory, it has to explain everything, right? And this is where we talked about yesterday. It's like there's very few people who can cross-reference this stuff because there's not too many of us who are generalists. You know, not too many people can do the electrical engineering, quantum physics, the biology, the spirituality, you know, the philosophy, the metaphysics, whatever you need. So the more of us that come together with our unique gifts in each of those realms, if you will, the stronger it's going to be for us to come together. And it's going to happen faster. I'm already seeing, you know, these conversations that I've been having. I've just been a dude in a room for the past few years, reading books and watching Dan. And it's evolved and morphed into something so much bigger and more beautiful with all these different groups, you know, consulting Dave and doing, you know, GW's work and a lot of different stuff that's out there going on. Even the conversations like the Terrence Howard thing the other day. I mean, to me, that's a perfect example of like, even though much of what he said was not great, the excitement that it started in that, again, the ritual that it started was people going, oh, wait, what? That's what's meant, you know, because he may not be exactly right, but it makes people go, wait, reconsider, you know. And so again, time loops, information, when it comes back up, you can reframe it, you know. And if you go searching for it, you can do it that much faster.
I love it. Okay, so I have to complete, but I'm so grateful. Let's do this again. And let's do it on that note right there, like create some magic with some ritual and what's possible. So
Thank you all.
Everyone.
Yes, I'm so excited. Thank you, the audience, for joining us.
Yes. So much bliss.